talk about two tough acts to follow. My two prior moderators, Kelly and Anne Marie, are unbelievable, and of course, Tony did a great job, as did Ken. And sort of in Anne Marie's session, we looked at a little bit of the broader career and life story of Ken's, and we're going to, in this session, we're going to dive into one chapter in particular a little bit. And I want to introduce on Ken's left Frank Blake, who became the CEO of Home Depot early January 2007, which if you go back to...
January 3rd, to be exact.
Okay, thank you, sorry. January 3rd. If you go back to Ken's comment, the 28%, 44-year now return in the public markets is pretty incredible. We're going to put that up later tonight. You'll get a look at it. It's pretty beautiful. But there's a squiggle. There's a squiggle in the middle there, and we're going to talk about that right now. So Frank joined the company at a rare time of distress bordering on crisis, I would say. And Frank came to that job with a bit of an unusual background. So he had a deep career as an M&A attorney, a very successful M&A transaction attorney and investor, but he had no retail experience and had never before been a CEO. So he was an unusual choice. So Ken, I wanted to, if you're open to it, I want to start there. So first of all, quickly, what led the board to decide they needed a management change? And then secondly, why of all people choose Frank?
Great leadership is not, you haven't got to say you're a great leader. Your behavior will show that you're a leader. There was an elegant humility in Frank that, and by the way, he'll argue it's fine, he can do what he wants. He saved this company. This company was all about its culture. And Frank made sure that we celebrated that culture and we nurtured it and we help it grow and get stronger. And under his leadership, I promise you, and Bernie, a great story. Bernie and Nardelli developed a dislike bordering on hate. And when the board, thank God, decided we had to make a major leadership change in the company, we went with Frank. So, and Bernie was now off the board, so he couldn't know anything, insider. When he was told that Frank Blake was the new CEO, another GE guy, numbers, that's all they care about, numbers. The following Sunday, Frank met me in Palm Beach, and we had breakfast with Bernie. And to say the atmosphere was hostile would be a massive understatement. And I watched Frank, and Bernie was not good at hiding his feelings. And he was pretty rough on Frank. You go from there to now here's Bernie with his foundation. Who does he call and say, would you please be the chairman of the foundation, Frank Blake? That's how far that relationship went. And I can tell you that because I love the stores. I love going to the stores. I love bullshitting with the kids. I have fun with these kids. What he did could only be done by a person with vast amounts of humility and understatement. And Frank, you can argue what you want. This company would be gone if he hadn't have gotten that job when he got it.
Can I just jump in on this?
Of course, yeah.
I mean, first off, I hope you all were here to see the last hour because you realized what an amazing privilege it was to have an opportunity to work for Ken. To give real context for your question, Will, which was a great question, you need to understand that I had worked at it for a decade at GE before this. The person who hired me at GE and was the vice chairman and highly, highly thought of When it was announced that I was going to be the CEO of Home Depot, immediately, right, Ken? Immediately contacted Ken and said, bet you $10,000 the kid doesn't make it 6 months.
He didn't call me. We were coming out of mass. We were coming out of mass in the morning.
And so it was not it was by no means a logical, I was by no means a logical choice. It was, you know, I'm forever indebted to Ken for taking
I want to
that
be
risk.
honest. When we go back, the Friday before, what happened was Gerald Ford died, conveniently for us, because the national day of mourning was January 2nd, 2007. We reached a point, and look, rattles, where we were at the trail. We were at the end of the trail with Nardelli. It was over, and I called for an executive committee meeting of the board, and we all agreed. It was Friday morning around 11 o'clock. We all agreed that Bob had to go, and it wasn't like, now Frank was vice chairman, and the thing that Frank had with him was this great, great well of humility that gave you great confidence that this guy his priorities were right, which is very important. This company's culture, I can't say it enough, is 99.9% of how we succeeded. Those kids. And John Clendenin he was chairman of Bell South, and he was in Atlanta on this day, and I called John and I said, John, go find Frank Blake and ask him if we offer him the job, will he take it? I just was talking about you a minute ago. And Tom, it's Harry. Tom Taylor. Okay, so anyway, so I'm a little wacky, you know, what the hell are you going to do? So John goes to him, and your answer was you wanted to think about it. Now, we're going to make a decision, and I've called for a special board meeting on the following Wednesday, the 2nd, which was the day of mourning. And John comes back and tells us he wants to think about it. I just tell him he's got 3 hours to think about it. We need an answer. And he said he would do it. And I don't think I can find the words that will adequately ever tell you how much one man meant to almost 500,000 people. And Frank and I, and by the way, to finish the story about, I'm coming out of Mass, and the guy's name is Larry Bossity. He just died, you know. He was one of my closest friends. We're coming out of Mass, and he says to me, oh, you really bitched this thing up. I says, what do you mean? He says, I had that guy work for me. He couldn't lead a group in silent prayer, for Christ's sakes. That's Larry Bossity. So I said, well, maybe he couldn't lead a group in silent prayer, but he's got 500,000 people following him down the road right now. And he says, he won't be there in 6 months. I thought, I'll tell you what, Larry, 6 months is a slam dunk. He's got to be here a year. What do you want to bet? I said, it's 10 grand. I said, okay. The loser pays 10 grand to the charity of the winner's choice. This is God. God is good. To the day, we're walking out of Mass again. And I said, Larry, guess what? I just talked to Frank Blake this morning. He's still in his office, and he's got the same phone number. And he's so what? I said, so what? You got a check on you? 10 grand to the Boys Club in New York. And that's what, but let me tell you what, this was a slam dunk. This was truly a slam dunk. Every company ought to have the opportunity to have a Frank Blake to pick from. Trust me, things would be a hell of a lot different, all for the better. And by the way, one of the first decisions he made was all these businesses that he had a strategy was buying. He comes to the board and said, we got to get out of those businesses. We got about $9 billion, I think. And we did a Dutch auction. Didn't we do a Dutch auction?
Yeah.
Go ahead, tell them the story.
Well, so hopefully in this I can convey to you all some of the incredibly number of things that Ken did for me. I'll start with there's sort of a mythology within Home Depot that when I became CEO, the first thing I did was call Bernie Marcus. And that was a big deal that I would have the presence to, the first thing I do is I'm going to call Bernie Marcus. Actually, it's not true. And I've said that over and over to Ken, and he never takes the credit for it. My brain was fried. I had no idea what the first thing I should do would be. And Ken said, you need to call Bernie Marcus. That's the first thing you need to do. Then on the...
You're lying.
No. Why? No, I promise you. So, but this is it. Imagine working for someone who goes out of his way not to take credit and in fact invents stuff that you did to give you credit for. That's pretty damn unusual. The second thing is on the description of the sale of Home Depot supply, I can't begin to tell, I mean, again, you get the sense of this person. It's starting to rain frogs in the housing industry. I mean, it is before 2008. In 2007, we are negatively comping. Things are very, very stressful. We're trying to sell Home Depot supply. We had a deal for it for $10.3 billion, and we were going to raise, in addition, some debt and do a big stock buyback. Think about capital allocation. Think about the wisdom and strength to say we're sailing into this storm rather than hunkering down. And the deal collapses. I mean, you can go into the detail. The deal starts cratering in front of us. They retrade the deal, go from $10.3 billion to $8.5 billion, require us to take a guarantee on $1 billion of the debt on the deal. I can tell you most people around the boardroom would say, well, look, we can hold on to this. For me, it was hugely important to get the deal done. And without Ken, it would not have happened. And without Ken, we would not have then turned around and bought back a whole bunch of Home Depot stock. We bought back 15% of the company in 2007, which again, if you looked at the numbers, these aren't going to be exact, but my first quarter, it was a negative 7% comp. Those of you who know retail go bullet in the head. My second quarter was negative, another high single digit, 5+% comp. And we're buying back shares of the company. That is a brilliant capital allocation, scared the crap out of me, but it really gave a whole purpose to the business. This is what we're about. This is what we're doing. We're going to make this work. And it was a hell of an investment.
Yeah, this is the Singleton Prize here, so we do really care about capital allocation. And this is right.
Don't stop.
Thank you, Ken. Right out of the box, you guys. That's a pair of really big and hard capital allocation decisions, right? So the first one of those two things is you're selling Home Depot supply. It's a big business, and you have to take a 20% reduction in price at the 11th hour, and you proceed to go ahead and do it. So that's hard to do. Then you turn around and use those proceeds with some additional debt to buy in 15% of the company. So just to acknowledge that, like right out of the gates, Frank is setting a tone under Ken's tutelage for a certain way of thinking about how they're going to create value going forward. So there's a whole capital allocation part of this, but I do want to just quickly, so Frank starts and you get right to it. Like you get right after it. You've got that piece going on, you've got that. Talk a little bit about, since we've touched on it, Ken has this morning or earlier with Anne-Marie, the cultural fix that was required post-Nardelli and how you guys thought about that.
So again, on this, and I sent to Ken for his 90th birthday, and Tom and Brad Paulson, who worked at Home Depot, will recognize this. We do big store managers meetings, and you get thousands of store managers there, and it's a very cultural moment at Home Depot. In 2008, Ken addressed all of our store managers, And the message he gave the store managers in 2008 is just what you heard from him in the last hour. It is, we are about doing good. We are about, I mean, the same example of finding that person in your store who needs help and help them, and you get the rapt attention of 3,500 people in this room, some of them, as you can see on the video, crying as Ken goes through this description. And it is, from a cultural perspective, it is just absolutely the case. These are such hard jobs, working in retail. You know, no one kind of says, hey, my life's career, I want to work in retail. These are such hard jobs. And then when you get the number one, I mean, the founder of the company, co-founder, Bernie would say the same thing. If you get that person up on the stage in front of all the people, you know, the key leadership in the field, saying this is what we're about culturally. It's about doing good. That was exactly the message. It was amazing, right? I hope you listened to it again.
Well,
And all without a script. I mean, just as you could see here, unscripted, brilliant conversation.
you know, it's tough to quantify how important these kids are that barely get out of high school to come to work for us. And I just have a natural affinity for these kids. I feel, I was a rough around the edge kid. I still am a little rough around the edge. I'm trying to smooth it, but, you know, why mess with success, right? One of the kids, who was Ed Edens, manager of the Jericho store, I'm walking the store one day, and I said, what's going on? He says, Ken, I think I'm going to leave the company. Why? This is one of our big stores. Last year, it did $130 million, one store. And he said, Ken, this is not the company that it used to be. I said, what do you mean? He said, Ken, we used to want to hear what we need to do to make it the best place for a kid to come to work every day. Now we're discouraged from doing that. So I called Bob and I said, Bob, I'd like to come down to Atlanta. I flew down. And I said, Bob, we got a problem. What do you mean? I said, the faith that these kids have in this company is being impaired. Badly. He thought they were a bunch of crybabies. That remark was enough for me to say, it's over. It's over. They weren't crybabies. They're the magic sauce. They're the magic sauce. And what Frank, and I'm coming back at you, baby. What Frank did was to bring his job, CEO of the company, down to a level where the kids could feel they could touch it. They could see it. They could be part of it. And he restored that. And I submit to you that if Frank hadn't taken the job, I think better than even chance the company would be gone. It's that simple. And so he can tell you all the stuff that I did. Most of it is fairy tales on his part. He did it.
Well, so Frank and I had some back and forth before this, and Frank, you sort of laid out some specific examples of this partnership between you guys and some learnings
learning for
that
me.
Ken had imparted
Yeah.
over time. So maybe tick through a few,
So
because they're very specific. They're
This
good
could
examples.
be
Yeah.
a long, long conversation, but
Yeah.
I'll give a couple of examples. So early on, first off, actually, I'll start with a general comment because it applies to Ken. Anne-Marie does the same thing. Jack Welch, for whom I worked, did the same thing. This endless curiosity. So the questions, I would get a call from Ken almost every day, particularly in my first year. I needed it. And the call would start something like, how are sales in the garden center? And I at least know what the hell the sales were in the garden center. I give the answer. And then the next question would be, how are we doing on chrysanthemums? And I go, I have no idea how we're doing on chrysanthemums. And then it would be, what's the shrink rate on chrysanthemums? And it would just keep going. Who's our vendor there? And it would keep going down this trail of questions. And the first few weeks of this, I realized, wow, I better know this stuff. I better be able to follow this trail. I got to get down and understand this from the details up, which was hugely important to me to understand. I mean, it was just a great lesson. This is not a 30,000 foot. This is a 3-inch to 30,000 foot. Second example, this is just in the first couple of months. I get a call from Ken, and he says one of our board members has walked your store in California. It happens, I think it was in Palm Springs, I can't remember. Walked the store, and he said, your store looked like a third world store. It was just horrible. So I said, got it. So I call the person who's running the Western Division. I said, you know, the board member walked the store. It looks like a third world country. Please go fix it. 3 weeks later, I get a call from Ken saying, board member called again, store still looks like a third world. It wasn't a, hey, you suck, you're horrible. It's just a statement. But Ken has a way of making the statement that you go, oh, I got it. Fly out and check out that store. And sure enough, it looked like a third world store. And there were a set of issues that needed to be addressed. But it was that engage, go down, you need to connect from the store up. And it was kind of, I feel like Ken was giving a constant tutorial in a very meaningful way. And I was playing catch up, honestly. The partnership comment is nice, but I was playing catch up.
Store visits as a percentage of your time, like before that you had
I
done.
lived in the stores.
Yeah. But before you start, that was not
spent
under the
almost no time.
Almost no time.
Almost
right?
no time. I was buying companies, and I spent almost no time in the stores. And then it was full-time. So one of the things, I had to develop my own hacks for how am I going to deal with Ken. So one of the things I did was I said, okay, every Saturday morning from 6 o'clock to 7:30 in the morning before customers come in, I'm going to pick a merchant, and we're going to go bay by bay in the store. Because, goddamn it, I'm going to know what the margin rate is of spray nozzles. That's part of my job. And the same with making sure connecting with associates. It was a constant learning process.
You know, he can stand just on his academic accomplishments alone. But I can't say it enough. Frank's humility is what carried the day. When Frank would go into a store with a kid, now here he is, catch this, Harvard undergraduate, Columbia Law School, clerk to Justice Stevens of the Supreme Court, there's only 9 of them a year, someplace in Washington, Department of Energy.
Department of Energy, yeah.
Okay. And he comes to Home Depot to work strategy. His humility was what bonded the kids to Frank. Not only did he revive the culture, he made it stronger, and more importantly, his kids came to view whatever utterance came out of Frank's mouth as gospel. You could take it to the bank.
So let me. I need to keep jumping in and correcting here. So I mentioned in the 2008 store manager meeting, and because Home Depot, we had an HR department that would take notes from all of the store managers about what happened in the store managers meeting. You can imagine what the theme of the 3,500 notes were. Because at the end, Ken very nice, he kind of came, put his arm around me and said, "This is yours, kid, go do it." Nearly 100% it was, we don't know who this guy is yet, but if Ken says he's great, we're along for the ride. That was very much the message. And I can show you the printouts from that.
Well, it's sort of a radical change, right? The company has done one thing unbelievably well for 30-ish years, which is add stores, grow stores. But it gets to what you guys do under Ken's guidance, and what you do, Frank, is you stop adding new stores. You, in fact, shrink the store base. And in the process of doing that, end up dramatically growing. This Anne Marie's excellent reports, which I read as part of this, sort of outline this in advance, but you end up growing the revenue and the profitability enormously on a shrinking store base. So just talk a little bit about that. How'd you pull that off, you guys? How did Ken guide you to that? And
so it was, at one point I go to Opelousas, Louisiana. I don't know if anybody here has ever been to Opelousas, Louisiana, but in Opelousas, Louisiana, there were 2 home improvement stores. There was a Home Depot and a Lowe's, and there didn't deserve to be 1 home improvement store. So that was a sign of this was not a good allocation of capital. The board saw it, Ken saw it, everybody saw it. It was, okay, the question was more, can we generate the productivity from the existing stores to make up for the engine of growth that had been the new stores? That was the risk. But we also had the benefit of a tailwind from starting to invest into .com. And that was the right decision. In fact, we wrote off the entire pipeline of new stores just so that everybody would be focused on our existing. It was like, we're on this island. We got to make this better.
interesting.
There's a lot of talk about me and Frank and me, but you can't underestimate Bernie Marcus and the culture that he created and nurtured and encouraged. Bernie was truly one of a kind. Bernie would go in the stores, I'm cleaning it up, and say to the kids, those guys in headquarters, they're all suits, don't listen to them. And he taught them that status didn't matter. What mattered is how did the customer feel about the experience of being in this store? That was the name of the game. If we had them where they felt like it was comfortable and good and helpful, they're going to keep coming back. And but again, Frank, with all due respect, we were gone. It was over.
So yeah, I've got so many great vignettes. But again, early on, I'm walking a store actually with Ken. I remember exactly where it was. It was Waterbury, Connecticut. Waterbury, Connecticut's a tough town, and this store was a rough store. Shouldn't have been walking it with a member of the board, never mind my lead director. I realized the mistake. As soon as we walked into the store, doors open, associates come up, they see Ken, they say, oh, Ken, are we going to have a town hall? So in Home Depot parlance, that means something's not going well. Everybody wants to go to the back of the store and talk about it. So we go to the back of the store, and it is just, the associates are so upset, and they're railing at things, and I'm going, Ken may not get his check because he may decide 6 months doesn't work for this kid. And they're just upset about one thing after another. And I'm kind of taking notes, and I say, okay, we're going to do X, Y, or Z. And then I get up to leave. And Ken says, well, that's not how I'm used to Home Depot meetings ending. I have no idea what he's talking about. And this was a hostile group. I mean, this was not a happy group of associates. And Ken gets up and leads a Home Depot cheer for these 25, 30 associates. And it was the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. And he hadn't said anything. He had just let me handle the meeting, writing on my pad. And that broke the ice. And from then on, it was like everybody slapping everybody. Oh, yeah, things aren't really that bad. We were overstating it a little bit. We'll get it back. Ken, we'll get it going. Don't worry, Ken, we're going to do it. It's such an interesting expression of the connection. Same with Bernie, Same with Arthur. The connection the founders of the company had with the core of the store was hugely important. I mean, people say, how do you make a culture like a Home Depot culture? And I say, I don't know the answer, because when I got there, Bernie and Ken and Arthur had already done it. And so it was a matter of reinvigorating it, not creating it from scratch. They had already done it.
However, starting it is one thing. Making sure it's healthy and it grows is another thing, which is a bigger part of the exercise. Again, we had a major crisis in leadership in January of 2007 that was only going to get worse with time. And I mean this, I've said it, I wasn't whistling Dixie. I had no doubt that Frank Blake would get the job done. What was the job? Restoring the culture. I'll give you a for instance. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, this guy went to Harvard and this guy's Columbia, and he's writing these very deep opinions for the Supreme Court justice, and he's now working in this Home Depot store. Frank called me and said, let's walk some stores together. So he flew up and we went out to Columbus, Ohio. Now, no offense. Frank typically is dressed like he goes into a closet with no light and picks his jacket and a pair of pants. That's all. As long as they cover it. They may not match or they may not be sartorial splendid, but that's okay. The purpose of clothing is to cover up. So we go to Columbus, Ohio. I'll never forget this. And Frank said, excuse me, I got to check something. What it was?
Don't.
It was an auger.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Somebody in Atlanta told him we had mispriced an auger. Now, you know what an auger is? Stores might sell 2 or 3 of them a year. They're these gadgets that when you stopped up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you don't have one, you wish you had one. And he went to make sure that we were on our market. You lose it in the rounding in terms of the numbers. But it was that commitment to making sure that the culture and what we were good at doing, which was really, really respecting the customer and letting the customer know that that kid in the store has one thing in mind, and that's to give that customer the best experience they've ever had in a retail setting. And that's what they do. But they got to believe, they got to feel like what I do matters. Okay, I don't have all that stock, and I don't have that title, and I haven't got my own plane, but what I do matters. And that's what he restored. And it was fragile.
So I'll just listening to Ken, I think, again, you get this also from the last hour. And what I love about this discussion with Ken and Ken getting this award is that you see there's capital allocation and there's heart and faith allocation. And that what really hit home, in addition to the capital allocation, was seeing, and Ken's absolutely, where the founders' hearts were. And everybody working in the store saw that too.
So you guys have this, Frank, you have this great 8-year run. You're kind of like Rocky Marciano, right? You retire undefeated, incredible run. You know, double the S&P return, and you know all the standard capital allocation metrics are great. More importantly, you're restoring the culture. But 8 years in, you sort of decide to step down. And so what was behind that? And then very importantly for both of you guys, how do you replace the humility and other characteristics, or think about replacing those in your successor? How do you guys think about that?
So far, so good. And this is, this is Frank's creation. We've had a succession now of 3 CEOs in a row who are truly exactly what we'd want them to be. Frank, and then Craig Manier, and now Ted Decker. And they all have an enormous well of humility. I can't stress enough the importance of humility, not only in business, but in life. And you don't have to fake it. Believe it or not, there's somebody out there better than you. No, my wife would say, you haven't found him yet. I say, but seriously, these were all the things that Frank put in place that were badly damaged. It was a wounded animal, and it was hurt. And these people, they signed on, and we've treated them as good as we can. But Frank, I'm sorry, you'll never, ever, and probably that's your genius and that's your charm, take the appropriate credit you deserve for putting this company on the right track again. And you can't replace that.
So one of the other great things about working for Ken is that he just relentlessly gives me credit for this. So, I mean, you can see.
Not enough.
This is actually really a
sorry.
good deal for me. But it is the case, and he deflects it constantly. The learning from him was intense, and I mean, it was continued to be a learning process. In fact, I love that Anne-Marie asked him about NYU Langone, because I've had now 3 conversations with different people who run medical, teaching hospitals, who all want to know about Ken and Robert Grossman and how they did it. So this is an amazing man, truly amazing man.
I want to share a story with you. One of my closest friends was Jack Welch. In fact, one of the great honors of my life was when I was asked to deliver the eulogy at Jack's funeral. And the last few months of his life were not pleasant. I used to pick him up and take him to the beach club where we lived and have lunch with him. And one day he's in deep thought. And he says to me, and this was when GE was really struggling now, really was bad. I'll clean it up, because Jack was a man who had the biggest vocabulary of bad words I ever heard in my life. And he says, you blanking Guinea? You blanking Guinea? I said, yeah, that's me. He says, what the hell do you see in that guy? He was around me a long time. He said, and look what I did. I had these 3 guys that I was watching like a hawk, and I blew it. I said, Jack, I don't know the answer to that, but I never had any doubt that Frank Blake was put together the right way. Whether it was his upbringing as a child, whether he was born that way, I don't know what it is. But Frank Blake can walk into a room of kids that haven't graduated from the 1st grade and make them feel like they're the smartest people in the room. And that's, to me, what leadership should be all about. And Frank, I'm sorry, I appreciate all your kind thoughts about me, but truly, and I have most people agree with me about this, he fixed it. He made sure it carried on. And by the way, today, it's the strongest it's ever been. Ever been. And again, that'll be Frank's legacy. He didn't do bad financially either. But that's what capitalism is all about, isn't it? You know, and don't apologize for your success. Now, what you can do with your success is share it. Share it. Let the world know that the better you do, the better the world's going to do. These people that accumulate wealth for the sake of accumulating wealth. Why? But Frank, in front of all these people, he the man.
We've got a room full here of highly talented, aspiring CEO, investors, leaders. Is there a word of advice that you guys would want to pass on to them before we open it up to Q&A?
go ahead.
First off, I think that comment about heart and faith, and you see that from Ken, it's underappreciated, but in the end, what makes the biggest difference. And then second, my learning from, one of my learnings from Ken is the courage to make really difficult decisions. I was having a discussion about the share buyback, and what usually happens in companies is you buy back shares when the company is doing well, and you don't when the company is not doing well. It is having the vision and courage to go, I see through the present day to a different world where this is going to make a lot of sense. I mean, we bought back the shares at $37, and now they're over 400. I mean, think of the vision involved in doing that when the economy and the company was not doing it.
And you bought back a third of the shares, right?
Yeah.
So,
And they thought we were nuts when we did it. But to go back, and I don't want to beat this to death because I might frighten some people. I can't tell you how precious my faith is to me. If it only reminds me. A kid asked me one time, you have any idea what your net worth is? And I gave him an answer that I'd never thought of before, but it was perfect. My net worth is what good I do with what I have. If you think about that, my wife and I love giving money away. I'm having more fun giving it away than I had making it. And I'll tell you something scary. Be damned, God always wins because I end up with more net worth after I give the money away. I mean, the guy won't give me a chance. I mean, and about charity, pick something that grabs you. I happen to be very big on uniformed services, cops, firemen, military people. Elaine and I are going to dedicate a facility in Florida, Veterans Day. The place is called the Big Dog Ranch. There's going to be 80, and by the way, these dogs are well kept. These are all rescue dogs, many of them from China. These dogs are mutts. Who knows what the hell they are. The place is air conditioned. It's spotless. You'd think you're in the finest hotel in the world for dogs when you walk into this place. 40 of the slots are for companion dogs. And it costs about $35,000 a year to train this dog. Let me tell you the one story. One of the kids that came back from overseas had PTSD. He'd scratch his chest until he bled. We trained a dog to get on his hind legs and put his front paws on the soldier's chest, and he stopped scratching. We have another 40 slots where these kids that go on deployment and they have a pet, we'll board them for the duration of their thing. I mean, it's things like that. And you want to know something? I feel pretty good about it. Now, humility is precious. But humility starts with you having self-respect for yourself. It's easier to me to demonstrate humility if I have a reasonable respect for me as a person. And that's something I think I got from my family, my mother and father. But I see in this man, I don't want to get you carried away, I see sainthood here. No, I'll tell you why. He never takes credit for anything. He's an inspiring leader, and he gets people to do things they never thought they could do. That's the best of all. Confidence. And Frank, I'm happy I have this chance to brag on you because, Frank,
this was supposed to be the opposite.
I'm right in your room.
This was supposed to be the opposite. You can see.
No.
This is hard. It's hard to deflect it back to you.
All right, I want to, yeah, I think that's great advice. I want to thank you guys very much. This has been an excellent session. Ken has given us 2 hours, and we've got a dinner where he's going to be quite prominently featured. So please join me in thanking Ken and Frank.